By the time Jesus arrived, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. His body was inside the tomb, and everyone believed it was over. But they were about to witness one of the greatest miracles Jesus would ever perform. But this story did not begin at the tomb. It began in a quiet village called Bethany, where Jesus had people he deeply loved. There lived a man named Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha. They were not strangers to Jesus. They were his friends. One day, Lazarus suddenly became sick, and little by little, his condition became worse. As Lazarus grew weaker, Mary and Martha knew there was only one person who could help him. So they sent a message to Jesus. "Lord, the one you love is sick." When the message reached Jesus, everyone expected him to leave immediately. But instead, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." But then Jesus stayed in the place where he was for 2 more days. In Bethany, no one could see what Jesus could see. As the hours passed, Lazarus grew weaker and weaker, until finally, Lazarus died. The house that was once filled with hope became filled with grief. Mary wept, Martha mourned, and the people of Bethany believed it was over. But while Bethany mourned, Jesus finally turned to his disciples. "We should return to Judea." The disciples were shocked. "Teacher, only a short time ago, the people there tried to stone you. Why would you go back?" But Jesus answered them, "There are 12 hours in the day. Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, because he sees this world's light. But anyone who walks at night will stumble, because he has no light." Then Jesus said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." The disciples did not understand. "Lord, if he sleeps, then he will get better." Jesus was speaking about death. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But now, let us go to him." The disciples still feared returning to Judea, because they knew danger was waiting there. Then Thomas spoke, "Let us go also, so that we may die with him." When Jesus finally arrived near Bethany, Lazarus had already been in the tomb. For 4 days, the village was still mourning, and many people had gathered to comfort Mary and Martha.
When Martha heard that Jesus Christ was coming, she could not stay inside anymore. Her heart was heavy with grief. Her brother was gone. The house was filled with mourners. But somewhere deep inside her pain, she still believed Jesus was her only hope. So Martha ran to meet him. The moment Martha finally reached Jesus Christ, her strength broke. Tears filled her eyes as grief poured from her heart. "Lord," she whispered painfully, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The pain in her voice was deep, not anger, not rejection, just heartbreak, because the one she trusted most had arrived after everything already felt lost. But even through her pain, Martha still held on to faith. She looked into Jesus' eyes and said the following, "But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, He will give you." There was sorrow in her voice, but there was also hope, a tiny flame still burning inside her broken heart. Jesus Christ looked at Martha with deep compassion. Then he said gently, "Your brother will rise again." For a moment, Martha's heart paused, but she thought Jesus was speaking about the future, about the resurrection at the last day. "Yes, Lord," she answered softly. "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." She still did not understand that the one standing before her had power even over death itself. Then Jesus spoke words the world would never forget. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though they die, yet shall they live." The wind grew quiet. Even the grief around them seemed to pause, because Martha was no longer standing before only a teacher. She was standing before the author of life. After hearing these words, Martha hurried back to the house. Her heart was still heavy with grief, but now there was something else inside her. Hope. She quietly pulled her sister, Mary of Bethany, aside and whispered, "The teacher is here, and he is asking for you." The moment Mary heard that, she immediately rose, because even in her pain, her heart still longed for Jesus. Mary could not stay seated any longer. She stood quickly and rushed out to meet Jesus. The mourners watched her leave and followed behind her, thinking she was going to the tomb to weep again. But Mary was running toward the only one who could bring hope into her darkness. When Mary of Bethany finally saw Jesus Christ, the pain inside her broke open. She fell at his feet weeping. Tears poured down her face as she cried, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The same words Martha had spoken, because both sisters had carried the same heartbreak, the same question, the same grief. And all around them the mourners wept too. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow. When Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the people around her weeping too, his heart was deeply moved. The sorrow around him was overwhelming, and even though he knew what he was about to do, Jesus still felt their pain. Tears filled his eyes, and there, standing outside Bethany, Jesus wept. The people standing nearby watched the tears fall from Jesus Christ's face, and quietly they began to whisper, "See how much he loved him." Some were moved by his compassion, but others still questioned, if this man opened the eyes of the blind, could he not also have kept Lazarus from dying? The grief, the confusion, the sorrow filled the air around Bethany, but Jesus remained silent, because he already knew death would not have the final word. Then Jesus took a deep breath and walked toward the tomb. The cave stood silently ahead of him, sealed by a heavy stone. Inside rested the body of Lazarus. 4 days in the grave. The mourners followed quietly behind. No one understood yet that they were about to witness the power of God. Jesus Christ stopped before the tomb. The crowd stood in silence. Then Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Fear and confusion spread through the people. "Lord," Martha whispered nervously, "by now there is a bad smell. He has been dead 4 days." But Jesus looked at her and said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" Slowly, the stone was rolled away. Jesus lifted his eyes toward heaven, and with a voice filled with divine authority, he cried out, "Lazarus, come out!" The earth seemed to hold its breath. Then, suddenly, a movement came from inside the tomb, and before everyone's eyes, Lazarus stepped out alive. The mourners gasped in shock. Tears filled Martha's and Mary's eyes. Death had lost, and hope stood alive before them.